Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is Rurouni Kenshin by Nobuhiro Watsuki, Volume 1. Jumping back to manga on the channel, and this one is a very good one. So some sort of background, at least from my background with this. Rurouni Kenshin was one of the first animes that I actually watched growing up. It wasn't the first manga I read though, not by a long shot. Rurouni Kenshin is one of those series that I actually read the manga years after I watched the anime. At least most of the anime. I don't think I've actually watched all of it. There's a lot of OVAs and special series and movies and other things that, other media that Rurouni Kenshin has been created in. And the manga came much later when it was released by Shonen Jump graphic novels. Kind of around the same time, they were also releasing Naruto and One Piece and all the other series. Rurouni Kenshin itself, though, is a fairly old series. I believe it was originally published, in 1994, right? And then this particular issue, let's see, first printing October 2003. So this is a first printing U.S. edition, 2003, which is when it was translated, but it started in 94 and was a fairly successful series. In fact, a lot of great mangaka came out of Watsuki's team here for Rurouni Kenshin. I haven't mentioned this a lot about manga, and I think it's important to mention, even though I mentioned story and art by Nobuhiro Watsuki, it's kind of understood in Japan and among people who kind of understand how this stuff gets made, that there's actually a big team that typical mangakas tend to employ when they create manga. Now, this isn't always the case. There are some mangaka that do work mostly alone or in much smaller teams. But in general, especially for stuff in the Shonen Jump or basically anything that has to be released weekly, it's almost always going to have a big team behind it. And that's just the nature and the logistics of it. They just have that you kind of have to if you're going to create 20 pages of art and story every single week, especially of the quality that the Japanese generate, even without the color, right? Remember, it is a ton of work to write, lay out, ink, and do backgrounds and editing and all that stuff within the span of 7 days, right? Usually less than that, usually like 6, really, because the last day is going to be basically pre-press, printing, and distribution, right? So anyway, I've been kind of babbling on enough about this. What is Rurouni Kenshin? Rurouni Kenshin is essentially a samurai drama, probably one of the most popular samurai manga. I think I've gone over several others, including like Blade of the Immortal and probably the big one that's known here in the West, Lone Wolf and Cub. Rurouni Kenshin is definitely one of the more cuter shonen style series, and it follows the exploits of this character right here, Kenshin Himura, also sometimes called Himura Batosai, which basically translates to manslayer or man-killer, right? And essentially, Rurouni Kenshin is set in the Meiji era of Japan, which is sort of the period right before the Imperial Japan, the Japan that America had to fight in World War II. It's actually an interesting piece of history because it is essentially the aftermath of Japan's basically what happened to Japan after I'm saying we as the Americans came and visited them and kind of knocked open their doors and said, hey, open up and trade with us or else. For lack of a better term, back in those days, right? And sort of the unintended consequences of America opening up Japan was basically, it took a while, but basically a big revolution in Japan, which eventually toppled the shogun and put the emperor in charge of Japan for the Meiji era, which coincidentally led to Imperial Japan, which America would have to fight in World War II. A lot of historical irony behind that. But anyway, this doesn't really kind of deal with that history. It kind of deals with the life of a former samurai slash assassin after that great revolution, and him sort of living his life as a wanderer, running into this girl who's sort of running a dojo, a kendo dojo. Kendo being Japanese sword fighting, or sort of like the sport sword fighting, right? You know, at least the way that it's portrayed here, right? The Japanese have basically these dojos where you practice swordsmanship with wooden swords and whatnot, and it's practice for the real thing, getting the real swords and whatnot. Anyway, just gonna go over the first story right here. You get a pretty straightforward introduction right here. Again, you have this is very, very Japanese, right? You have basically a small exposition dump set in front of some images. You get a big splash title page right here, and then immediate introduction of characters right here. Very, very formulaic, and it should sound very familiar for those of you guys who've been watching my videos on Shonen Jump manga, because they literally all do this. They all do it. Now, there's obviously variations in formula and how they, and plot and characters and all this other stuff, but they all really follow this format. It's very tried, it's very true, it's extremely successful, and it is very hilarious how successful the Japanese are with this sort of formulaic approach to comic book storytelling. It actually makes me kind of laugh in the big picture, how I guess here us as Americans, we kind of overthink this like way too much in terms of like, oh, writing and all this other stuff. It's like, no, dude, there's literally a structure and a format to how to tell the story, and the Japanese just follow it and execute. It's as reliable and mechanical as a Toyota Corolla, basically. Anyway, he runs into this girl, and this girl's trying to basically stop this man who's claiming to be the Hitokiri Batosai, the legendary revolutionary manslayer. And he's basically shaming her dojo and ruining her life, right? And you know, he is just kind of comes across as a bit of a bum, but a very nice and well-to-do bum. And Watsuki basically uses a lot of romance tropes within the shonen genre here within Rurouni Kenshin. It's very curious that Rurouni Kenshin had quite a few female fans, mainly because of the main character here, Pretty Boy Kenshin, right? I will say this, my own opinion of this series, I thought Kenshin was an okay character. He was cool time to time. I really ended up liking his side characters way more, and especially through the middle series of Rurouni Kenshin. The side characters in this manga are so good. They're like some of the best in manga and anime. And the villains are also very, very good in Rurouni Kenshin. And that's what I end up remembering this series a lot more so than the main characters. I actually kind of like, I didn't really follow it from the main characters. It's mainly the villains and the side characters, and I end up enjoying way more in this series. But anyway, yeah, they go off, and yeah, some interesting notes about the manga. The manga is very different than the anime in that the two antagonists here are actually brothers that are trying to basically steal Karu, who is the chick here, her dojo, and basically sign the will away so that they can bulldoze it and build a bunch of, you know, investment properties and whatnot. Whereas in the anime, it's just Gohei, the big guy here, who is actually trying to get revenge on Karu for being embarrassed by her father many moons ago, right? So anyway, there's some you know, back and forth, some fights, a lot of slice of life stuff. But eventually, these guys here that the sort of the two brothers here basically corner Karu in her dojo, and after basically crushing her, and they're about ready to kill her, here comes the Rurouni Kenshin. And he kind of breaks apart, you know, not only does he kind of open up honestly about, you know, what it means to be someone who carries a sword and a warrior, right? But he kind of also expresses that despite his criticisms of Karu, etc., all this other stuff, he ends up still desiring to live in the ideal world that she lives in, right? And kind of forgot to mention this. Karu kind of has a dojo that professes a philosophy of a sword that gives life, which is kind of contradictory, right? And he himself, having been a man killer in the previous revolution, kind of finds that naive and almost laughable, right? That being said, having gone through war and killed many people, he does wish for that idealism to flourish in this new Meiji era, right? One of the things that I just remember most about Kenshin as a character is just idealism. He's a very idealistic character. Despite the pragmatic aspects of his life, having to fight, train, and kill people and whatnot. Almost to the point of being an ideologue. And that's kind of why I've never been super fond of this character compared to the other characters in the series, such as Sanosuke or Hajime Saito. I found those characters just more interesting to a degree. That being said, it's kind of similar to like DC comic characters in a way that Kenshin is kind of basically following a code, and that code makes him a more morally just and more difficult character. And by difficult, I mean not difficult as in difficult to understand, but his life is difficult because he has to follow this rule of not killing because he had killed so many people in the war previous, right? It was kind of a meander that I had going here to kind of explain the story here, but that's really the premise of Rurouni Kenshin. And he's got a sword who's like basically backwards, right? It's all reversed and stuff. So you can see right here, the blade is on the opposite side of the sword, and he just bludgeons people to death. One of the funniest things about Rurouni Kenshin is he hits people so freaking hard with the blunt side of his sword that almost like the majority of the times, every time I like read through this manga, I'm like, how does he not kill someone from blunt force trauma? Like, there are thousands of people who die from blunt force trauma all the time just because the sword is reversed. Doesn't even make any sense. But then again, you could probably say, like, how does Batman not murder people with his fist sometimes? So you just kind of go along with it, right? But yeah, so he ends up, after beating up the bad guys, he ends up deciding to stop wandering and stay with the lady. And I think this is kind of what attracted probably a lot of female readers to Rurouni Kenshin. There's an underlying romantic plot element to Rurouni Kenshin, in addition to the fighting and the shonen kind of drama and the leveling up and the training and stuff. And it's what makes Rurouni Kenshin very, I would say, endearing over the life of it, right? It's not just samurai fighting. It's not just samurai training or drama. There's a lot of romance, intrigue, mystery, that kind of stuff. And I feel that's why this manga, went on for so long, in that the premise of it being a true, fully fleshed out samurai drama within the shonen manga format. Basically, in addition to enduring characters and enduring concepts and ideas, as well as basically being a Japanese history nerd's favorite manga, it kind of ensured that this manga would forever be well known. And honestly, a very young Eiichiro Oda started off working on Rurouni Kenshin before later spinning off, and a bunch of other mangakas under Watsuki did that. So its influence continues to this day. And very great manga. If you get a chance to read it, totally recommend it. It is a bit heavy on Japanese history, so you kind of have to be a bit of a Japanophile or a Japanese history nerd to really get into it. But if you can get over that, you'll have a blast reading it. Anyway, that's the review, guys. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got any comments on Rurouni Kenshin, leave it down below, and I will see you next time.